Yeah. Hello, everybody. I have a few confessions to make right up front. Super high on Carenza. Been in bed for 2 days. There's definitely a pie chart. Mea culpa. And I'm not really sure how I'm going to follow a molecular visualist, but I'm going to try. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for waiting so long, and I won't keep it very long. I need to check one thing. Does the code of conduct say I'm not allowed to swear?
I am going to absolve you.
Okay, cool, because it's going to be very hard to say this topic without swearing. So, hi everyone, I'm Catherine. It's really lovely to be here. My topic today is be brave, even if it scares the shit out of you. And it happens to be one of our company guiding principles, along with be a good human, set the bar high, be curious, listen, be present, and build what matters. And so, but this one for me is always kind of through every company I've ever started and ever run. This has always stuck with us, and yeah, it goes along with what do you do as a job? I wrangle smart, interesting humans to build cool shit. So that's my title. That's usually what I tell my mom, and then she's like, "Oh, I can't repeat that to my friends," but you know, not my problem. So I'd really like to know a little bit about you guys, and I'll ask a few questions if that's okay. Who here is still studying? Oh, all of you. What, did they just bring the university? Awesome. Who here is working for someone? Okay. Who here is working for themselves? Okay, cool. And who here is in tech? Excellent. Okay, you've come to the right place. Although the visualizations will be a lot less PhD, so cool. I'm going to ask for some audience participation right up front because it's late and you've all had drinks, so there's no excuse. Would anyone here like to venture a definition of brave? Or give me an example of a moment you thought you were brave? Go for it.
I'll go for the definition. It's fearing something and doing it anyway.
I like it. Anybody else? You do get a fluffy bunny thingy. Okay. No fluffy bunnies for you. Awesome. So, you know, stickers and International Women's Day, yay. Here are a few definitions for you. Having or showing mental or moral strength to face danger, fear, or difficulty, so 11 out of 10. To face or endure with courage, and then you might have to ask, what does courage mean? And that's really to have the moral strength to venture, persevere, withstand danger, fear, or difficulty. And let me tell you, if you're going to start your own business at any point, all of these would apply. So I thought really long and hard about what does brave mean to me and what would be my definition of brave. And it's really easy to err on the side of things that are extremely scary. My first thought was this one really ridiculous time when I walked into a kloof near Knysna and decided to go for a swim, and a snake landed in the water with me, and there was no way for me to get out. So that was scary, but not necessarily brave. So then I had to rethink what was my definition of brave, and I thought about, okay, well, when is this one thing I really didn't want to do that was extremely tough? And so I've had the great privilege of running and being involved in lots of cool ideas and cool companies, but one of them didn't work out, and I had to go to not only the team, but also to our investors, to the media, to our users, and say, hey, all that blood, sweat, tears, roller coaster rides we've been on, the story I've told you, this idea that like it looks like it's really successful from the outside, the truth is we don't have the funding to continue. And that kind of fear is mentally debilitating. I mean, I've had panic attacks in the middle of traffic, just like, until someone hooted at me, which was a very good idea. So the thing is about humans is that we're really shite at predicting the future, right? So one of the things about being an entrepreneur is not only do you think you've found a problem you can solve, you also think that you're the person that's going to solve it. And then you think you're going to get other people to solve it alongside you, and then you're going to make money from it. And trust me, that delusional thinking is important because, you know, that's why we don't have that many unicorns around. And I'm talking about tech unicorns, not actual unicorns, which I still think might exist. So there's always this burning belief that we're going to get it right. And I think what it embraces for me is humans have this amazing, like, despite this fallibility, this incredible capacity to embrace like uncertainty, right? We don't know. We can't predict the future. We don't know what's right. We don't really know if the problem we're solving is going to affect and effect lives, but we do it anyway. And so for me, that embodies bravery. It embodies this idea that if you can embrace the uncertainty and you can move forward regardless, then actually every single human on planet Earth has the ability to be brave. Promise you, I'm shit scared standing here. So I hate this, but here we are. Okay, so let's start with this woman. So not only is the picture cool, and it's not a pie chart, but in 1885, this woman, who I keep calling Billy Nye, but I promise you her name is Nellie Bly, wrote this letter in response to well, she basically responded to a letter that had appeared in her local newspaper. And it was this extremely patronizing and really chauvinistic letter, which was titled, "What Are Girls Good For?" And so she impressed the editor so much that she ended up not only getting a job there, she became this trailblazing journalist. She circumvented the globe in, I think, 75 days with just a duffel bag. And she went ahead and actually did this full expose on abuse in mental asylums and changed the way that, all the legal rights and protections for mentally ill patients. But I think the thing is that her courage says as much about her character as it does kind of about the crimes, although I probably shouldn't call it crimes, but about the tragedies of that era, right? So she's celebrated as a hero in large part because she was doing things that people mostly attributed to men, these weird and wonderful escapades around the world, these feats of adventure, and yet girls were kind of taught to be diffident and perfect and pretty. You know, sit down and be quiet. And I don't think much has changed, to be honest. I think at the surface progress level we can see change, but I think that we still raise girl children with this language of insidious fear, yet we kind of teach boys that, you know, you can be brave and resilient. And I see that in how we, kind of how we treat little girls and little boys, which is, a little girl comes to you and goes, "Don't you think my hair looks nice?" And we all compliment. Yet boys bring you, "Look at my fort I've built," or "Look at my Lego," or, there's a very different narrative that we put out there for each of those. And I say this growing up in a household with first two and now a third boy, and just how different that treatment was, not necessarily by my parents, but just by society at large. So I guess a bigger question for all of you, although you're just starting out, youngins, is what are you going to do to change that, right? When you move forward in life, how are you going to change that narrative? And how do we all get to kind of be any embodiment of Nellie Bly? Here, ladies and gentlemen. So now I need to start asking questions. Which part of this is the most...
It's qualitative, so it's fun.
I did also credit the source, so no one knows it's me. Although I love this source because I think it's the gutsy girl escapades for your life of epic adventure. Anyway, so the truth is I've never been very good at being diffident, perfect, or perfectly pretty. I've actually really sucked at being a girl most of my life because I'm the one that's hanging upside down on a swing, and then I'm called a tomboy, or, it's this, you can't just be. And yeah, anyway, so what I loved about the slide is it kind of sums up my worldview, which is if we only have one life, if this is it, regardless of what you believe, if this is the only life you have, then I want to live it adventuring and doing fun, interesting things, because meh is just not an option for me. So for those in the back, that says meh at the big slice. Okay. So yeah, when I saw this wonderful pie chart, I was reminded of this extraordinary song by a chap called Guy Clark, and it's called The Cape, and I really recommend you listen to it on repeat because you will cry. But it's about a little boy who puts a flour sack around his neck and he climbs up onto the garage and he thinks he can fly. And so he takes this feeling throughout life, and he grows old and he still metaphorically has a flour sack cape around his neck. And what they say about him is all these years people said he's acting like a kid. He did not know he could not fly, and so he did. And that, I think, is the single most important thing my folks taught me, is it doesn't matter that I'm a girl. I was treated exactly the same, even though I promise you in university I was really pissed at that because my expenses were more than my brother's. You know, I'm a girl. But, you know, so this is really kind of my life philosophy. And now I'm going to do the bravest thing that I can do, and then I'll move on to why you guys are really here. And that is to show you some baby photos. Yes. And I'm going to show you a extract of something someone wrote, and I want to challenge all of you to do this as an exercise. It was presented to me, I'll get to it, but it was presented to me through a company called Be Dapper, which a friend of mine, Emma Donovan, runs. It's extraordinary. They do personal branding. So who are you? How do you present yourself to the world? Who do you see yourself as? And what they do is they ask people, you have to ask 5 people, 3 to 5 people, to tell you the 3 best qualities about you. Like, what do they like about you? And that's a really hard thing to do because it's that imposter syndrome, right? Even if people say nice things, you're like, meh. They probably just didn't mean that. And so I wanted to show this because I was really proud of it when I read it, and that is that I was attributed to having courage, but not just courage, the ability to stop and ask questions, because if I don't know, I don't know, and this is why I believe you should surround yourself with people smarter than you. But this little kid, who still, I promise you, hangs upside down on swings and gets really excited about bubbles and stickers, that's what I've taken into my work life and what I've had to try to balance as a woman in tech. Cool. Now let's get into the meaty stuff. So, what does it mean to be a tech entrepreneur in the context of being brave? So there's no doubt, I mean, we could deny it all we like, but that there are gender barriers. And so I think it's about not only breaking through gender barriers, but also kind of forging our own path. There are a lot of industries that are very male-dominated and will be for a very long time. But I think it's about making sure that the barriers we face, whether it's funding or mentorship or leadership positions, etc., that we push through those barriers and that we're willing to keep pushing, and that we don't only push, but we take all the others behind us with us, regardless of gender. And I think, I don't know if anyone heard her speech, but Jacinda Ardern, who's the outgoing Prime Minister, she might already have left, of New Zealand, said this in her resignation speech. I thought it was amazing. And she said, "I hope in return I leave behind a belief that you can be kind but strong, empathetic but decisive, optimistic but focused, that you can be your own kind of leader, one that knows when to go." And I think why that resonated for me is, you know, if you're too feminine, you're accused of sleeping your way to the top. If you're too assertive, you're called a bitch. And so how do you find this position where you can be just who you are? You know, a chick that wears skirts but still hangs upside down on swings, but can also be assertive but can be kind at the same time. I'm just not the person that screams and shouts at people. I just get quiet and disappointed. It's way more effective. Top tip. But it is something that I've always had to think about and be cognizant of. Like, I go into investor meetings, I don't wear low-cut tops and I don't wear skirts, because I have to put myself in a position of the other person and how they might perceive me and what their lenses are. And I think that's often what makes women better in leadership positions, because we do have to think on both sides of the coin. And you know, it's a known fact that companies run by women are often more profitable, etc., etc. So you can look up the stats. But just something to think about is, how do you break barriers in your world, and how do you celebrate those who break barriers around you? Okay. Pop quiz. Who here knows who Modesty Blaze is? Yes! Oh my word. There's so much to learn. Okay, so if you took Wonder Woman, MacGyver, probably still too old, and James Bond, and partnered them all together, you would land up with this fictional character called Modesty Blaze. She is whip smart, independently wealthy, well-educated but self-taught, she takes these incredibly calculated risks to basically go on capers around the world and save the goodies from the baddies. Okay, and then like goes home and just has tea. It's wonderful. So the reason I picked her is I've started a company, which is a shell company for now, but when I started investing one day, it's called Blaze Capital, because I was just so inspired by her. And the second ungooglable fact is I collect first editions. So if you find any, please let me know. But I wanted to reference her because I think she trailblazed in her era as a cartoon character, and secondly about risk taking, because if you're going to start your own business, there's a tremendous amount of risk. You got to like potentially invest your own money, you've got to convince people to join you, and that wonderful idea you're trying to solve is solvable, and that you'll make money from it. And at the end of the day, I feel it's either brave or stupid, and that is debatable whether starting your own business is a good idea. I think in some countries, starting your own business is a luxury, whereas I think in territories like ours, especially developing countries, often starting your own business is a necessity because there are no other jobs. You've got to do it for yourself. So there's a lot of risk involved in that. And so being brave for me is about taking calculated risks, and it's more importantly remembering that when you bring a team with you, you hold all of their livelihoods in your hand. And so the importance of being truthful and the importance of remembering that they have lives and their fates are there. It's why stories like that of Theranos with Elizabeth Holmes makes me so angry. Because yes, as entrepreneurs, you have to have grit and you have to have the ability to tell a good story. But you also have to remember that other people believe that story, and if you keep lying to them, that's on you, right? So the taking risks are important, but they should be calculated and they should be well thought through, and you should make sure you have the right people around you to support you. And I have a bag of flour in my mouth, sorry. While I have a sip of water, check out this image of Greta Thunberg, because that facial expression is badass. That kid was like, come at me. Okay, so yes, I think this is probably the most badass photo ever. But I think the speaking up part's important. We face a lot of criticism, whether you're just in a regular job, whether your lecturer is telling you that, you know, your visualizations suck. Like, there's a lot of criticism. I'm picking on you. I think, so, and the word no is going to come up a lot. It takes, I started when we were running a previous company of mine, Newstream, the one we shut down. I had this folder of all the no emails I got, just to remind myself that, like, for all the no's, there are yeses, right? I promise you, waking up in the morning, you're like, another no, and you've got to keep going, and then you get the high, and you're like, that's incredible. And so the speaking up for me is, I think there's a lot of criticism, there's a lot of skepticism about what you do, and there are a lot of no's, and I think it's really important to speak up when you are faced with things like biases or dismissiveness or just simply being pushed down, the discrimination in that industry. I found myself at a meetup the other day, I won't disclose which, but I landed up in a group of people, and I knew the guy, one of the guys was working with ETL, and I wanted to know what they were up to. And he asked me a question, and I answered him, and then he asked me another question. Before I could answer, he dismissed me. He basically said, oh, well, you're in management, you probably only know high level. And I thought, F you. Human employed by giant retailer. But then I walked up to him afterwards and I said, you said this interesting thing about X, Y, and Z, could you explain to me? And he couldn't dig any deeper. And he ended up sending me an email afterwards to prove his point that he knew what he was talking about. And so, you know, mansplaining 101. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I was often the one that said, oh, it doesn't matter that I'm a girl. The truth is that you do get dismissed, not just in the workplace, you get dismissed in many places. And if you don't speak up when you see other people dismissing people around you or dismissing you, you don't have to be rude about it. Often a witty comment or just being smarter helps. But speaking up for the people around you is really important. And this is not just a gender thing. That's if you see bullying or if you see discrimination in the workplace of any kind. And I think if we're going to be brave, it's about standing up and saying, actually, I don't agree with that. It's about being okay with having that look on your face when you get carried away because you've been arrested. So I want to just have you all feel empowered that you can speak up if you see something that's not right, because that's how we're going to change the next century and our next worldview. Cool. So I run a company that does a lot of cool innovation stuff. Love problem solving. I happen to have two of the humans here who help me solve problems tonight, so very excited about that. But I want to quote a woman called Linda Hill, and she says, leading innovation is about creating the space where people are willing and able to do the hard work of innovative problem solving. And she goes on to say that innovation is a paradox at heart. You have to unleash the talents and passions of people, and you have to harness all of that to get them to work in a useful way and come up with a solvable problem. And that it's this whole journey, and it requires like this collaborative approach, and it requires different viewpoints, and it actually requires people to disagree with one another. I avoid conflict at all costs, except when I'm driving, because road rage is real. But you know, at best times, like, I don't like conflict. It's not a fun position to be in. So if you're going to lead innovation, you have to also kind of embrace that creative vibration in a business, right? And so setting that stage to allow people with different viewpoints and different ideas to come in and to be okay with holding that space, which can be really tough. And if you're an introvert like me, despite appearances, really tiring. So that innovation side, my psych prof 101 said, everybody's afraid. That's why when you pass an open door, you always look. You never just pass an open door, you always look to see what's coming. Everybody's afraid of something. So I think if you're going to find yourselves in positions of leading change and leading innovation or leading anything for that matter, it's about making sure that you're comfortable with your own space and that you're okay to like have the uncomfortable moments and also learn from them. Most importantly, yes, we all have AI pictures because we all hate photos. I think it's really important about surrounding yourself with the people who matter. We don't do this alone, right? My husband was there when we had to shut the business down, and he watched me mourn 5 years of my life. And your family are kind of bringing you tea and sometimes putting money into your bank account. And you know, it's important to have people around you who support, who are willing to speak up. I'm extremely proud of the fact it's still not enough, but 1/3 of our team are female, and all in leadership positions. It's important to make sure that the people around you feel they have the space to speak up, to break barriers, you know, to essentially be there for the people around them. And we can't be brave without other humans around. So there are always some, you know, Superman, Batman had Robin. I still think Robin's cooler. Which leaves me with a quick quote. And I wanted to read this to you because when I was little, at no point did I ever have a dream about what would I be. I actually don't even think what I do is brave as such. When I was asked, what do you want to be after school, I was like, successful. And I never dreamed about a wedding dress or a white picket fence or anything. I actually didn't have a plan. And I like it that way, so I like where I am now. But Henry Thoreau, who wrote Walden, basically said, if the day and the night are such that you greet them with joy, and life emits a fragrance like flowers and sweet-scented herbs, is more elastic, more starry, more immortal, that is your success. And so I think if you're going to figure out what is success to you and what does it mean to be brave in any way, shape or form that you find yourself in, don't forget that success can only be defined by you. So with that, Happy Women's Day! Welcome. Who wants a plushie toy?
Okay, so my Cody bowl is empty. I've got one. But I will allow 3 questions and I will go fetch the last 2. Okay, so did someone have a hand there?
That gentleman has his hand up.
You have a hand.
So I can actually relate to your stories because when I was 17, I was very, very depressed. And I remember one day I met this guy from Romania, and he said to me, you know what, Peter, if you want to become more valuable in life, work on your skills, work on your communication skills, learn great books, develop skills. Later on, people are going to be attracted to you. When they come to you, build them. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And that has helped me in business for 20 years.
Amazing.
Where every year I just work on my skills so I can become better and better and better. And also, so I'm a mentor at Allen. So I mentor UCT and Stanford University students. And most of the time when we have sessions, there's this thing where I realized that most of them, they choose their path out of fear. This guy's practicality, thinking they're making progress. And I know some people here also want to start businesses, but they're so scared, thinking, what if I fail, what if I fail, what if I fail? So, in my own experience, I never cared about what I had. Because some people, they look at, okay, maybe I don't have enough money, or I don't know enough people. But what I realized is, regardless of what you have, just start.
Yes.
People will just come into your life. It's like a miracle. But,
You just have to be open to seeing that, right? It's about being open to the possibility.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Yes. Human at the back, you'll have to speak up.
So my question is kind of like a follow-up on what
Philip.
Philip.
I think that's what he said his name is.
Yes.
About like just start like all what I'm going to just say, but what goes through your mind? Let's say I don't know how much. Don't remember. Sorry.
I don't remember.
Like what's that initial thought that actually just provokes you to get into action? Like how do you get through the phase of imposter syndrome and finding all the reasons why you can't do it and all of that? How did you push past that to actually start?
It's a tough question to answer because I've never really. I have worked for a company, but it was still kind of startup, and I had a high, not a high enough, like not hierarchical, but I had a leadership position, so I didn't feel like it was being imposed. Because I started my first company while I was still at uni, and it's a funny story actually, because I did an internship, and then by the time I was done with that internship, I was managing, I think, 3 Woolworths accounts, a financial services account. I did Pearl Valley Golf Estate and Spa, like big accounts, and they offered me, I think, like 2,500 rand a month. I was like, funny, moving on. And so I then ended up doing a additional year at uni, and then actually Woolworths Financial Services came to me and they're like, hey, we miss you, can you help us with this thing? And I checked my contract and there was no restraint of trade, and I was like, I can. And so they were my first client. And the reason I say it's hard to answer is because I've actually only ever really worked for myself. In fact, I was offered a job by kind of potentially with Mozilla Firefox to travel and do really cool stuff, and I still wonder what would have happened if I did that. But I did a post about this on LinkedIn the other day. There's so many people who are saying, well, how do I begin and what do I do? And it just begins by putting down a thought on paper. Like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Who's that going to affect? And then really, like, with the amount of really cheap tools available out there, you can A/B test it with a quick web page. Like, are you interested in my idea? You can put, for very cheap, a couple of question polls on Facebook. Hate Facebook, but go with it. So they are, I think, people seem to feel like this should be the thing. It's not. You're going to have a million bad ideas before you have a good one. And you're going to fail. So, FYI.
Okay, we need one more question.
You haven't asked the question, so how about you?
So, I'm an introvert and I don't talk really a lot. So, what people normally do is that when you're an introvert and you don't speak, they think they can walk all over you with their dirty boots. So, how do you handle that?
For me, so I'm an introvert masquerading as an extrovert. I know, a surprise. But I define it by my introvertness is I love talking to people, but I get very tired. So I need large amounts of time by myself, and I take it. So I think you've got to define what is introvert and what are the things that matter to you. Because if there's certain things that you decide, these are the 2 or 3 things that matter to me, if people cross that line, that's the thing I'm willing to speak up about. I'm willing to say, you know what, I don't actually like it when you treat me that way. Or, have you considered that I might have this point of view? And it doesn't mean you have to do that in every aspect, but the truth is only you're going to be able to tell people what you don't like. It's hard though. It's conflict, and it's hard. Cool. Okay, I think I've been cut off. Thank you for having me.